Okay, I'm going to read this paper because, as I was just saying, as an interdisciplinary paper, it is touching on a variety of topics and disciplines, some of which I do understand better than others, but uh, maybe eventually, if this has any merit, it should be divided into uh, a couple of papers. Anyway, here's my first go at this complex topic. What I say is that my argument is about modern scientific technology in general, uh, but I will concentrate or use as a surrogate example strong AI. Uh, and my argument that I'm trying to put forth in the simplest terms, the issue is not simple, but my argument maybe is that many opportunities we associate with and anticipate as the fruits of technological innovation come with risks and dangers that exceed our present capacity to manage and with no clear path to achieve that capacity. Now, this, I think, is fairly uh, widely acknowledged position, uh, at least the first half of it. The second half, that we don't have a clear path to achieve that capacity, is perhaps a little more controversial. And then exactly what needs to be done in order to attain that path, if it can be, is the most complex and really is the heart of why I think this is an important topic. I'm going to develop this in four stages. Uh, the first is concerning the question, is about the question concerning technology, namely that human relations, about what human relations have with technology and how technological advances are altering the nature of human action. The second phase, the implications for the humanity uh, of the extraordinary increases in power and complexity that characterize modern technology. I think that very often we look at technology and our relationship to it in a pre sort of super modern context, and that misses a point. Then in phase three, which is divided over a couple of sections, I will focus on smart AI as the master technology and the harbinger of what's to come. And then finally, I will look at the specifically ethical dilemmas that are generated by autonomous technology. And in this section, I will refer quite a bit to the challenging position of Hans Jonas. So the question concerning technology. Concerns about technology are as old as civilization. Even before the advent of techno-science, humanity was aware of the ethical implications of technology-assisted action. That is, feats only made possible by the power uh, enhancing consequence of using tools, machines, and other human-made devices. Acknowledgement of the planet-altering and subsequent reshaping of human destiny through technology is an old story. We see this in the famous chorus of Sophocles' Antigone, for example, where the pride of humanity's success in exploiting nature through technology is both celebrated as a source of pride and lamented because it creates dependency and vulnerability. The biblical story as well asserts that human condition requires toil to have dominion over nature and thus survive, although in the need of redemption. Similar viewpoints can be found in the traditional literature of China and India, and no doubt other civilizations as well. Modern technology is an invention of the West, but questions concerning technology are universal. Perhaps it is precisely because these stories are old and enduring that today both the promises of yet untold benefit and warnings of impending catastrophe, simultaneously, they're taken together as normative with the resulting expectation that humanity will see continued progress and ever greater comfort, and that we will avoid, through technology, nuclear annihilation, disabling climate disorder, unchecked plagues and pandemic diseases and other disasters. The German philosopher Martin Heidegger published Die Frage nach der Technik in 1954. In this text, the driving question was, how is a free relation to technology possible? Or more particularly, how does one maintain one's true humanity in the midst of a world where technology structures much of our experience and alters our relation to nature? Heidegger's argument relies upon a distinction between thinking on the one hand and a kind of calculative activity on the other that is employed for problem solving on advanced bases even. On these terms, scientific reasoning is not thinking. Rather, thinking is what pursues being, that is, the source of what we are and what we can become. In is a kind of gift, Heidegger asserts, and thus thinking is a kind of thanking. One might see what we ordinarily mean by creativity as an aspect of thinking. When Heidegger questions technology and poses the question concerning technology, he is asking if technology leads us to pursue this way of openness to being, or on the contrary, occludes it. For Heidegger, modern technology is not merely a matter of efficient action. It changes our relationship to being and possibly compels our choices, both in respect to the environment and to our own work. In a sense, modern technology alienates the craftsman from his own work. Thus, Heidegger questions technology with one goal being to understand the possibility of a free relation to technology. In Dino Buzzati's novel Il Grande Ritratto, newly translated into English as The Singularity, and it's quite a good tale, I recommend it, the brilliant and tortured scientist Professor Andreatta says, quote, "Every language is a trap for the mind. Every language is a trap for the mind." What Professor Andreatta means is that language, both semantically and syntactically, for the sake of efficient communication or the execution of action, narrows the field of consciousness, artificing reality and excluding much that is in flux. One result on this view is a limitation or even complete lack of understanding possible conveyed through language. Perhaps humanity's greatest and distinguishing feature, language acquisition, has limited and falsified the field of consciousness, he maintains, stifling our development on the level of Homo faber. And what he believes further, incredibly, is that nonverbal, machine-based artificial intelligence has the potential to overcome such limitations, to open and expand fields of consciousness. Before questioning the notion that AI can overcome this kind of alleged limitation, I want to explore, in contrast to problem solving, the idea of thinking as framed by Hannah Arendt. Quote, "In the context and for our purposes, this distinction between knowing and thinking is crucial. If the ability to tell right from wrong should have anything to do with the ability to think, then we must be able to demand its exercise in every sane person, no matter how erudite or ignorant, how intelligent or stupid he may prove to be." Kant, in this respect, almost alone among the philosophers, was much bothered by the common opinion that philosophy is only for the few, precisely because of this opinion's moral implications. In this vein, he once remarked, "Stupidity is caused by a wicked heart," which in this form is not true. Inability to think is not stupidity. It can be found in highly intelligent people, and wickedness is hardly its cause, if only because thoughtlessness as well as stupidity are much more frequent phenomenon than wickedness. The trouble is precisely that no wicked heart, a relatively rare phenomenon, is necessary to cause great evil. Hence, in Kantian terms, one would need philosophy, the exercise of reason, as the faculty of thought to prevent evil. Thus, according to Heidegger and Arendt, drawing from Kant, technology is concerning because it works to suppress thinking. A free relation to technology would necessarily require the understanding and ability to operate, control, and regulate the devices and systems of modern technology. So, to what extent is this possible? Power and complexity of modern technology. The philosopher Hans Jonas argues that modern scientific technology raises philosophical questions that are not addressed by normal engineering or techno-science research. Technology can no longer be regarded as a set of tools which humans choose or not. There is often no reasonable alternative. And when we do choose them, our use is profoundly different in kind from the way tools have traditionally supported our labor. He cites 5 reasons for this shift, which he believes fundamentally alters the nature of human action. In brief summary, his reasons are: 1, technology has advanced from tool to machine to automatic device, creating an issue of how or even whether, in some cases, we control the devices we use and rely upon. 2, technological processes are often not well understood by users, including technologically sophisticated users, and often produce unanticipated consequences due to such complexity. 3, technology produces results disproportionate to human action. A simple, perhaps unconsidered or spontaneous act may result in consequences of overwhelming power. 4, technology may alter the environment permanently. There's an issue of irreversibility. And 5, results of technology may manifest in the distant future, beyond which we have any kind of relationship. It's the issue of an unknown and indefinite future. The last point is the most vexing, as we cannot know what we or the inhabitants of the future want. We want to resolve something in the here and now, but our solution will likely produce consequences for others who are unknown to us by virtue of their temporal distance. Unless we think justice only pertains to the present, even without unanticipated catastrophic results, we must admit that technologically mediated action on our own behalf does not promise stewardship of the earth or its living inhabitants. We are tempted here to resolve these 5 questions raised by Jonas with additional new and more sophisticated technological solutions. Yet this approach may deny the problem. Discussions about the inherent power of modern technology seem everywhere to be found, often celebratory, as with the futurists with their prolific enthusiasm regarding the singularity, sometimes doomsday thinking, as well as more extended analyses that are pessimistic but leave some room for the possibility of beneficial technological future. Recent accounts of this sort include Kate Crawford's Atlas of AI, Toby Ord's work on the future of humanity on a precipice, or Holly Buck's prescient after geoengineering. The diverse collection which these works represent fall in the tradition of Lewis Mumford's groundbreaking work of 1934 called Technics and Civilization. Written before the advent of the nuclear age, it saw how technology both formed what we understand to be civilization and held keys to its destruction. The convergence of concerns about the natural environment and the impact of modern technology has become a theme of public discourse for nearly a century. Already in 1934, Lewis Mumford issued a call to action for humanity to consider its options in the face of the threat to its very survival by ecological catastrophe or industrialized warfare. His book, Technics and Civilization, was not that well received by scientists and engineers at the time, who tended to regard Mumford as naive or uninformed about the intricacies and complexities of technology, whereas humanists, though not widely engaged with the topic, were not generally critical of its methods or conclusions. This kind of divide, later famously portrayed by C.P. Snow as two cultures, still persists, despite the many collaborations between scientists and non-scientists that we see at many universities today. While most participants in such collaborations. Scientists, engineers, and humanists alike express a degree of techno-optimism. The sudden and proliferating advances in AI technology, the driving force behind technology, has raised concern among Silicon Valley entrepreneurs. Perhaps the most extreme example of this concern was represented by Eliezer Yudkowsky, a leading researcher and until recently a proponent of AI development. He has declared recently, in reference to the open letter signed by leading researchers, lab directors, and company executives, proposing a 6-month hiatus to cool down the current pace of development. He said, pausing AI development isn't enough. We need to shut it down. His reason, otherwise we will all die. That is, human civilization will not survive. He believes that the developers are so smitten by the idea of general artificial intelligence that even normal levels of engineering precaution have been abandoned. In other words, the nature of the risk posed by further development of AI is not grasped by those most involved in its development. Why should this be the case? Is there something about the quality of technoscience that obscures risk? To examine these questions, consider the emerging technoscience of strong AI. So now we focus on artificial intelligence or strong AI, artificial general intelligence, or strong AI. The term AI today is used in mass communications to cover a broad spectrum of digital technologies, some of which do not exhibit the characteristics being discussed here. For our purpose, strong AI will refer to AI based on neural networks. Many people first became aware of the startling potential of this new technology in January of 2016, when Google's DeepMind AlphaGo program defeated some of the world's top human Go players. As was noted at the time, it was one thing when IBM's supercomputer Deep Blue beat the reigning world chess master Garry Kasparov. But the win at Go represented a new approach and a new potential for digital computing. The game of chess has far more rules and well-defined steps than the game of Weiqi or Go. The advances in computer technology which stand behind the success in playing Go were not based simply on an increase of brute computing power, but rather on a new approach that permitted computers, so to speak, to train themselves in modes of inquiry rather than reference sources already according to rules stipulated by programming. The effectiveness of this approach was increased significantly by the introduction of a new simple network architecture called the transformer, based solely on attention mechanisms that dispensed with the problems of recurrence and convolutions entirely. Examples of this technology, known as artificial neural networks, are commonplace as drivers of social media, e-commerce, personal assistants, and more. Because in these applications and others, computers answer our questions and anticipate our wishes or needs, we relate to them in a manner not dissimilar from the way we relate to other human beings, including, it seems, friends and acquaintances. To say that machines, including their software systems, can be, in the same sense as fellow humans, able to communicate with us, suggests a degree of awareness and the ability to think as we do. The appearance of consciousness suggests its possibility and raises the question of machine sentience. The Turing test. Can machines think? Just what consciousness is, what conditions support it, and where it is situated are questions that have puzzled philosophers and scientists from time immemorial. Whether consciousness is a characteristic of perception itself, or instead a higher order awareness of perceiving, as in I am aware that I am seeing the Golden Gate Bridge, was questioned by Aristotle. When following Descartes' reaction to Aristotle, in the quest for certainty, mind-body dualism became standard. Consciousness became exclusively the property of mind and identified with cognition. For Descartes, the self became a thinking thing, res cogitans, and the exclusive and defining attribute of humanity. It is this idea that identifies the essence of humanity with this general notion of consciousness that provides intellectual undergirding for the view that high-performance computing machinery can think as humans do and possibly be sentient. The controversial announcement in 2022 by Google engineer Blake Lemoine that LaMDA was aware of its own existence and claimed to be a person propelled the question, at least in the popular mind, of human-like AI into the forefront. The idea that the nature of an answer to a question posed some configuration of computing machine is an indication of cognitive or sentient status of the machine derives from the work of Alan Turing. I'm not saying that Turing held that, but it comes in the wake of many years of contemplation of reflection on Turing's position. In his famous 1950 paper, Computing, Machine, and Intelligence, Turing proposes considering the question, can machines think, by a way of a test he devised called the imitation game. The details of this test are now well known, but what is interesting is how Turing interprets the results. The test for machine thinking is based upon a model of thinking which is identified with calculation and similar cognitive tasks. The test is really one to see if a machine can complete the tasks of the sort that typify the work of human computers, that is, those people who did calculations, for example, in the war effort. The question of machine thinking, formulated as the imitation game, was meant only to show that with calculations and similar cognitive operations, that digital computing machines could resemble human thinkers. That is, machines, like Descartes' human egos, were thinking things. Both the human body and the physical structure of the machine were, for Turing, irrelevant to the question of whether machines were intelligent. In the paper, Turing enumerates and offers refutations to 9 objections to his claim that in this sense machines could think. Several are pertinent to current debates about strong AI. The objections are, as Turing named them: 1, the theological objection; 2, the heads in the sand objection; 3, the mathematical objection; 4, the argument from consciousness; 5, arguments from various disabilities; 6, Lady Lovelace's opinion; 7, the argument from continuity in the nervous system; 8, argument from the informality of behavior; and 9, the argument from extrasensory perception. Turing follows his refutations of these objections by admitting that he has no, quote, very convincing arguments of a positive nature to support his views. That is because the inference that one can draw from the imitation game is only that if one cannot distinguish the response from a machine from that of from a human, then, accepting any objections, it is reasonable to assert that machines can think. Thus, his treatment of objections is central to his position. The computers that Turing knew were discrete state machines, whereas the human brain neural network is not. Lady Lovelace's objection, number 6, refers to Babbage's work on an analytical engine in the 19th century. Mathematician, she was, Lady Lovelace, Ada Lovelace, recognized and was recognized as the first computer programmer, asserted that the analytical engine, Babbage's machine, could only do what it was programmed to do. It couldn't originate anything, and thus could not think in the ordinary sense of the term. Turing's response to this was, quote, this statement is quoted by Hartree, who adds, this does not imply that it may not be possible to construct electronic equipment which will think for itself, or which, in biological terms, one could set up a conditioned reflex, which would serve as a basis for learning. Whether this is possible in principle or not is a stimulating and exciting question, suggested by some of these recent developments. But it did not seem that machines constructed or projected at the time had this property. I am in thorough agreement with Hartree over this. It will be noticed that he does not assert that machines in question had not got this property, but rather that the evidence available to Lady Lovelace did not encourage her to believe that it had. It is quite possible that machines in question had a sense had, in a sense, got this property. For supposing that some discrete state machine has the property, the analytical engine was a universal digital computer, so that if its storage capacity and speed were adequate, it could, by suitable programming, be made to mimic the machine in question. Unquote. Turing continues his refutation when commenting on objection 7 on the continuity of the nervous system, suggesting that a continuous state machine simpler than the human nervous system, a differential analyzer, were used in the imitation game. The results would persuade the human participant. The argument from consciousness, which demands that a thinking thing be able to produce a concerto or a sonnet because of thoughts and emotions felt, is dismissed by Turing on the grounds that the only way the condition could be tested would be if one were the machine, if one itself were the machine examining itself, more or less what the Google engineer Limon seemed to suggest, an absurdity that would repudiate the validity of the imitation game as a test of machine intelligence. Current speculations about strong AI marvel at machine performance that suggests originality and reflective choice in ways that the digital computers Turing used did not exhibit, and which might have satisfied Lady Lovelace. Two developments that have changed computers from Turing's day invite further reflection. The most prominent from a technical standpoint is the development and use of artificial neural networks, so that computing machinery is not, as it were, so mechanical, carrying out program tasks suited to its particular design, but have become learning machines that are trained rather than programmed. The analogy with human pedagogy is obvious. It is though training and habituating through experience, it is though the training and habituating through experience that children develop, by which children develop the moral and intellectual virtues that guide their approach to life's challenges. This state is not simply one of cognitive intelligence, but what Aristotle called in Book 6 of his Ethics, phronesis, a term frequently translated as practical wisdom, and which he located in a complex conceptual network consisting of perception, scientific knowledge, craft knowledge, techne in the technology in the old sense, politics, deliberation, decision, nous or understanding, the virtues of character, wisdom, and other less prominent psychological capacities such as cleverness, comprehension, and natural virtue. Now, Aristotle's network may be compared to a neural network in the sense that an input passes through the various nodes and produces an outcome. Is it reasonable to expect this outcome to be consistent with the ideals of phronesis? Some of the early research on neural networks and psychological disorders suggests a context. In their influential paper of 1943, Warren McCullough and Walter Pitts introduced a new model representing the acquisition of knowledge applicable, they said, to both biological neurons and computing machinery. Their new idea for the analysis of brain activity was that instead of the actual mechanisms through which the neurons enter excitatory or inhibitory states, to focus on the logical relationships they embody. In this way, or rather in a way, this approach might be compared to Aristotle's, since the logical ordering of the neurons in the human brain resulted in attitudes and beliefs as well as cognitive power. The research had a clinical objective, to be able to correct the erroneous that was the basis of psychological disorder. As an alternative to psychoanalytic and behaviorist approaches common in his day, the logical errors that a brain's neural network made were to be corrected by a kind of rebooting of the network through practices such as electroshock therapy. When states of consciousness were in a state of logical disorder due to experiential inputs, mental hygiene was at stake and psychiatric phenomena such as schizophrenia obtained. The processes of artificial networks were no different. The second development that has to do with the status of the body and its relationship to thinking, the mind-body problem. In his 1950 paper, Turing dismissed on the one hand, dismissed I mean out of hand, what he called the theological objection, that God has given an immortal soul to every man and woman, but not to any other animal or to machines. Hence, no animal or machine can think. Turing recognizes that early modern science and philosophy accommodated this view, which led to various contrived solutions, none of which afforded the possibility of creative intelligence originating in human, other animal, or machine bodies. Indeed, the body was a machine prescribed by the laws of Newtonian mechanics. Human thinking, in one way or another, was a gift of God. Neural networks provided a way beyond this kind of mechanical conception of bodies. With the redemption of the body as an instrument of thought, the notion of thinking machines in turn took a turn in an unsurprising direction. Although Turing doubted that it was likely, the lifelike appearance of humanoid robots contributed to the popular acceptance of a belief that computing machines can indeed think and feel like humans. Although it was a publicity stunt by Hanson Robotics, the conferral of citizenship on the robot Sophia by Saudi Arabia testifies to this. In the popular mind, artificial intelligence has been associated with intelligent robots and has been represented this way in fiction for quite a while. And in many fictional accounts, they frequently have been portrayed as competitors, if not potential enemies of humankind. From legends like the Golem of Prague to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and Karl Čapek's play R.U.R., where the word robot was first coined, intelligent robots follow a path that at best challenges the expectations of their creators. The science fiction writer Isaac Asimov, in a short story from 1942 called Runaround, proclaimed the now well-known 3 laws of robotics, ethical principles, so to speak, to which robots must adhere in order to preserve human interests. Robots must obey these laws in order to preserve human interests. But even these are thought to be insufficient protection of a world where advanced AI and robotics has proliferated. Asimov's laws are generally regarded now as insufficient protection. In these accounts, AI ethics is a matter of control. That is, in accounts like Asimov's, AI ethics is a matter of control. Do humans or machines call the shots? This is the main idea in literary and popular culture tradition that sets the stage for understanding the astonishing rapid development of AI devices and systems, many of them freely available to anyone around the world, and their growing influence on all aspects of life. In the arena prescribed by strong AI, the worlds of science and science fiction converge. The latter fuels the imagination regarding both the promise and the peril of what AI can and quite probably will do to alter life in the world as we know it today. Hans Jonas was right to call for a new ethics for the rapidly emerging technological society. He swam against the stream in proposing that metaphysical issues that had generally been put to rest had to be reconsidered in order to establish ethical principles. In this discussion, I have touched upon the questions of thinking and consciousness, especially insofar as they inform our judgments about what it means to be human, the extent of human agency, and our ability to define ethical principles worthy of respect in this age. There is clearly a strong connection between understanding is generated and validated by the acceptance of ethical and moral principles. In her essay, Thinking and Moral Considerations, Hannah Arendt says that to talk about thinking is so presumptuous, it requires a justification. Her justification stems from her reporting of Eichmann's trial after the Second World War in Jerusalem for crimes against humanity, in which she developed the controversial thesis of the banality of evil. Her argument is that even when committed on a gigantic scale, evil deeds are possible which are not the expression of any particular wickedness, pathology, or ideological conviction in the doer. Instead, they may be the consequence of a total absence of thinking. Arendt asks, could the activity of thinking as such, the habit of examining and reflecting upon whatever happens to come to pass, regardless of specific content and quite independent of results. Could this activity be of such a nature that it conditions men against evil doing? We can do no more than allude to the linguistic and psychological, let alone metaphysical issues behind this question. But the proposition that moral and ethical choice is predicated upon a mode of thinking that includes examination and reflection is ultimately behind the questions of whether machines can think, and if they do, are they capable of rendering judgments based upon examination and reflection that includes moral and ethical considerations. How should we regard and evaluate AI-generated solutions to environmental degradation or questions of euthanasia, nuclear catastrophe, the potential of biological engineering, issues of distributive justice, or the status of children, of undocumented immigrants, and so many more? It seems at this stage our dilemmas are not so different from that presented in the fictional accounts of robots or other artificial individuals, like Frankenstein's monster, who initiate actions unlike what we expect or desire. In light of the advances that neural network technology has brought to AI, how does the approach of Hans Jonas stand up? His treatise on technological ethics was published first in Germany, where it was widely applauded as a source of inspiration and justification for the Green Movement. His argument, which culminates in a strong version of the precautionary principle that he advocates as a proper response to a heuristics of fear, states that we should consider the worst possible outcome for technological innovation and then not act until we know how it can be avoided. This harsh and pessimistic assessment of the potential of advancing technology is in response to what he believed was the prevailing and excessive ideology of techno-optimism and principle of hope based upon utopian thinking. The precautionary principle itself needed no justification, the precautionary principle itself needed justification, and this Jonas derived from his teleological account of the phenomenon of life. Before the era of modern science, it was generally thought, following Aristotle, that the entirety of being, that is, the universe and every constituent part thereof, exhibited purpose. Modern science rejects this teleological account of the universe. Jonas does not revert to the Aristotelian view, but says that living matter, in striving to survive through its metabolic exchange for the external environment, does show purpose. That the purpose of all life is to survive, preserve life. Jonas's limited teleology is compatible with Darwinian and neo-Darwinian theories of evolution, becomes the basis for Jonas's claim for our ethical responsibility to life in the future. This is an ontological ground of responsibility, for one that can be observed by scientific measure. The principle of responsibility, grounded in this way, is an imperative in a form not unlike Kant's famous categorical imperative, which states, act only according to a maxim whereby you can, at the same time, will that it should become a universal law. Unquote. In Jonas's reformulation, it becomes, act as so the effects of your action are compatible with the permanence of genuine human life. Or, in your present choices, include the future wholeness of humanity, among the objects of your will. We have a duty, Jonas argues, to act such that the well-being of future life on Earth is able to flourish. Of all living organisms, only humans have the capacity to adhere to this imperative, and so it is the duty of humanity to do so. Stuart J. Russell, in his book, Human Compatible, recognizes the potential for AI machines to initiate action contrary to human interest, but believes that means can be taken to ameliorate this threat by careful operational and management strategies. In his telling, AI machines can be constrained to operate within a framework that protects the priority of human preference. This protection can be attained by training machines with sources that show human preference, that is, training with direct access to human experience, rather than, for example, an archive of internet texts and communications. However, how human experience reveals the intentions of humanity's preference for the long-term flourishing of life how it adjudicates among alternative conceptions is not clear. His formulation is, the machine's only objective is to maximize the realization of human preferences. 2, the machine is initially uncertain about what those preferences are. 3, the ultimate source of information about human preferences is human behavior. With respect to strong AI, both the possibility, with respect to strong AI, both with the possibility obtains that this duty may be abandoned in favor of permitting thinking that machines that train themselves are being to initiate actions that do not adhere to the principle to protect the future wholeness of humankind. Russell's approach requires that in the training process, smart machines be capable of discernment, a form of human judgment that is itself acquired through experience. It's a quality not unlike Aristotle's phronesis. What kind of training process could inculcate in such a machine? Or inculcate this discernment into machines. Perhaps thinking machines could be constrained by the heuristics of fear, but since it's contrary to the innovative spirit of technology, it seems unlikely. Moreover, why should machines wish to protect and foster human preferences above their own? Even without resolving the question of machine sentience, if machines governed by strong AI have the sort of creative intelligence and self-control that defines strong AI, we enter a vicious circle when we try to subordinate their strength to our not well-defined purely human preferences. The tragedy imagined by Čapek still looms before us. This is the ethical dilemma presented by high-powered autonomous technological devices.